Tonight's story from Vast Realm of Learning is about Robert Carter, a mechanic who spends Christmas Eve helping a woman stranded in the snow, missing his family dinner. Little did he know, this act of kindness would change his life forever. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. In the heart of New Haven, nestled between the rising skyline and winding rivers, lived Robert Carter. At 46, Robert wasn't a man of wealth or luxury, but he had built a life grounded in hard work and an unwavering sense of duty. As a mechanic, Robert had earned his reputation over the years, known for his reliability and willingness to lend a helping hand, even if it meant sacrificing his own comfort. His shop, Carter's Repairs, sat on the edge of town, its faded exterior a testament to years of service. Though not extravagant, it was home to Robert, who found pride in the simplicity of his trade. The cold winter winds of New Haven weren't kind to anyone, but they seemed to hit hardest when you were alone. Robert's small garage, with its familiar smell of motor oil and grease, was often his refuge after a long day's work. He had no family of his own but stayed close to his younger sister Rachel, who had a home of her own and two young children, Luke and Ella. They were his family, his anchor, and they loved him in a way that made him feel connected to something larger than himself. Still, his quiet and solitary existence was something he accepted, often neglecting the chance to socialize. But tonight was supposed to be different. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in years, Robert had promised Rachel he would join her for the holiday dinner. "You've got to come, Rob," Rachel had insisted in her usual no-nonsense way. "The kids miss you, and so do I." Robert had nearly argued, but knew deep down that she was right. He hadn't spent Christmas with his family in years. Despite his usual resistance, he knew he needed to be there. The thought of Rachel's warm kitchen, the sweet smell of roast turkey and cinnamon rolls, and the laughter of Luke and Ella filled him with a longing he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine it. As the clock neared 6:30 p.m., Robert wiped his hands on a rag, finishing the last repair of the day. The engine hummed softly, and the final tire was fixed. With a glance at the clock, he grabbed his coat and keys, eager to head to Rachel's. The snow had started falling, blanketing the town in white as the evening sky darkened. Just as he reached for the light switch to turn off the garage, the old phone on the wall rang, sharp and insistent. Robert froze. The phone rarely rang this late, especially on Christmas Eve. For a fleeting moment, he thought about ignoring it. After all, he had plans, and the holiday dinner was waiting for him. But the ringing didn't stop. With a sigh, Robert reluctantly walked back to pick it up. "Carter's Repairs," Robert said into the receiver, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of the day. There was a brief pause before a soft, frantic voice came through the line. "Hello? Is this the mechanic shop?" Robert's tired tone softened. "Yes, this is Robert Carter. How can I help you?" I'm so sorry to call so late," the woman's voice trembled. "But I've broken down and don't know what to do. I'm on Highway 13 just outside town. I've been trying to start my car for over an hour, but it won't budge, and the snow is getting worse." Robert frowned, his mind immediately assessing the situation. Highway 13 was a remote stretch of road, especially at night. The snowstorm had picked up, and the temperature was dropping quickly. He glanced out the window at the swirling snow, then at the clock. Rachel's dinner table seemed so close, but the thought of leaving this woman stranded in the storm made him pause. "I'll be there," he said firmly, already pulling on his coat. "Stay in your car, keep the engine off to save fuel, and bundle up. I'll come get you." Thank you so much," the woman said, her voice filled with relief. Robert hung up the phone, grabbed his toolbox, and stepped outside into the biting cold. The snow was already blanketing the small town. As he trudged toward his old tow truck, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. He had been looking forward to his family's warmth, the noise and bustle of the Christmas celebration. But now, the call had changed everything. The old truck roared to life with a sputtering noise, and Robert steered it carefully down the icy road, headlights cutting through the heavy snowflakes. The wind howled, scraping against the truck's body. His hands gripped the wheel tightly as he drove slowly toward the highway. He pictured Rachel's home in his mind, the table full of food, the kids running around with excitement, the laughter echoing through the rooms. For a moment, the thought of them made his chest tighten, but he pushed it aside. Someone needed help, and that was all that mattered. It felt like forever before Robert finally spotted the woman's car, half buried in the snow near mile marker 12. He stopped the truck behind her vehicle, leaving the engine running for warmth. Stepping out, the wind immediately bit at him. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked toward the stranded car, his flashlight cutting through the dark. Inside, the woman was hunched over, her breath fogging up the windows. "You all right in there?" Robert called out, his voice carrying warmth through the storm. The woman jumped at the sound of his voice. She rolled the window down just enough to speak. "Yes, I think so. Just really cold," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Stay put," Robert said, his tone firm but reassuring. "I'll take a look at your engine." The woman nodded, relief evident in her eyes. Robert made his way to the hood of the car. Despite the cold biting at him, he illuminated the engine with his flashlight. After a quick inspection, it was clear the battery was dead. He returned to the woman's window to deliver the news. "Your battery's dead. I'll give you a jump, but you'll need a new one soon," he said. The woman let out a sharp breath, her gratitude mixing with lingering anxiety. "That's fine. I just need to get somewhere warm." "I'll have you running in no time," Robert replied, already heading back to his truck for the jumper cables. The snow continued to fall around them as Robert worked, his hands cold and stiff, but his movements steady. It was what he did best, fixing what was broken, no matter how cold or challenging it got. After what felt like an eternity, the woman's car finally sputtered to life. She climbed out to thank him, her eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've saved me tonight." "It's no trouble," Robert said with a shrug, already moving toward his truck. "Drive carefully, and don't stop unless you have to." The woman hesitated, watching him for a moment. "You're a good man. Merry Christmas." As Robert climbed back into his truck, her words lingered in his mind. He had missed dinner, the laughter, and the warmth of his family. But as he drove back through the snowy night, he couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. Sometimes, the best gifts are the ones we give without expecting anything in return. For a moment, the woman's voice softened, her gratitude shining through. "You're a good man, Mr. Carter," she said quietly. Robert merely nodded. "Take care now," he said, watching her drive off into the storm. As the woman's taillights disappeared into the night, Robert felt a peculiar warmth inside him. Yet, it was fleeting as the weight of the night crept back in. Glancing at the clock, it was 8:10 p.m. The roads were worsening, and Rachel's dinner table felt farther away than ever. Climbing back into his truck, Robert started the engine and turned it toward home. Yet something had shifted within him. He had done the right thing, but the loneliness of Christmas Eve hung heavily in the air. As Robert navigated the snowstorm, his thoughts churned. The roads grew more treacherous, visibility fading with each passing minute. His headlights barely cut through the thick curtain of snow, and the wind howled around the truck like a chorus of whispers. Yet, as his truck groaned under the strain, his mind returned to the woman he had helped. Without hesitation, he had acted on instinct, doing what felt right. Still, a quiet ache lingered, the warmth and laughter of Rachel's family dinner now a distant memory. The hours dragged on as the snowfall thickened. Robert's thoughts wandered to the woman. Who was she? What challenges had she faced before her car broke down? Robert, a man of quiet resilience, rarely sought recognition. But tonight, a small part of him wondered if anyone noticed the sacrifices he silently made. Finally, the familiar lights of New Haven emerged, a small reprieve amidst the storm. Robert's heart lifted slightly, thinking of the quiet sanctuary of his home. Yet, as he passed the outskirts of town, the weight of missing Rachel's dinner pressed heavily upon him. By the time Robert pulled into his driveway, it was 11:30 p.m. Christmas Eve was almost over. The world outside was blanketed in a pristine, soft white. He turned off the engine and sat in the stillness. While he had done a good deed, an overwhelming sense of isolation seeped into his bones. Inside, he dropped his keys on the counter and sank onto the worn couch. The silence enveloped him, thick and heavy. The clock on the wall read 11:57 p.m., mere moments until Christmas Day. The night had passed him by, leaving him adrift in responsibility and reflection. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a golden hue over the room. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the furnace. Memories of the previous night, helping the woman and the lonely drive home, rushed back. It was Christmas morning. Robert glanced at the answering machine, hoping to hear Rachel's voice or find a plate of leftovers on his doorstep. But there was nothing. He rubbed his eyes, acknowledging a longing for connection he seldom admitted. The coffee pot sputtered, filling the air with its bitter aroma as Robert stood by the window. Snow covered the streets, untouched and serene, but the house felt cold, empty, and waiting. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door startled him. Frowning, he set his coffee down and walked to the door. When he opened it, his eyes widened in surprise. There stood Rachel, bundled in her coat, with Luke and Ella beaming behind her. In her hand was a steaming casserole dish, the foil catching the morning sunlight. Robert blinked, struggling to process. "Merry Christmas, Rob," Rachel said cheerfully, stepping inside as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "What are you all doing here?" Robert asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Rachel breezed past him, the kids eagerly following. "What does it look like we're bringing Christmas to you?" she said with a grin. For the first time in what felt like years, warmth filled the room, not from the furnace but from family. In that moment, Robert realized that while he had spent so long giving to others, it was okay to receive the kindness of those who loved him. The ache in his chest softened, replaced by the comfort of being surrounded by those who mattered most. Christmas had found its way to him, bringing with it the reminder that no one should face it alone. "You," she said, setting the casserole dish down on the kitchen counter. Robert stared at them for a moment, speechless. He had expected nothing, certainly not this. The kids rushed to hug him, their laughter filling the room. Luke practically shoved a present into his hands. "Open it," he urged, bouncing on his toes with excitement. Robert carefully unwrapped the present, revealing a hand-knitted scarf. It was a little uneven, with shades of deep blue that didn't quite match, but to him, it was beautiful. He held it up, feeling a lump form in his throat. "It's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Luke hugged him tightly, his small arms wrapping around Robert's waist. "We love you, Uncle Rob," he said with innocent sincerity. "I love you too, buddy," Robert whispered, his voice gruff with emotion. A rush of warmth surged through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Rachel set a plate of food in front of him, ham, mashed potatoes, and buttery rolls. "You haven't been eating enough, have you?" she teased gently, though her voice was filled with warmth. Robert smiled faintly, his heart swelling with the simple love of his family. "I'm doing all right," he said, though the truth was written in his eyes. He hadn't felt this alive in a long time. They spent the morning together, the small house alive with laughter and conversation. For the first time in what felt like ages, Robert felt a deep sense of peace. The scarf still rested around his neck, a small but constant reminder of the love he had been missing. As he looked at Rachel, the kids, and the warmth of their presence, he realized that this moment, this unexpected connection, was the true gift of Christmas. Later, as Rachel packed up to leave, she paused at the door and turned back to Robert. "You're a good man, Rob. Don't forget that," she said softly, her eyes shining with gratitude. Robert smiled, his heart full. "Thanks for bringing Christmas to me," he replied, his voice genuine. As they left, Robert stood at the door, watching them disappear into the snow. The house was quiet once again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. He pulled the scarf tighter around his neck, feeling its warmth against the cold. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The garage was busy with customers still relying on Robert's skills, yet there was a new energy inside him. A quiet understanding that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple out and change someone's life. He had made a difference, not just for the woman stranded on Christmas Eve, but for himself as well. He carried the lessons of that Christmas with him, a gentle reminder that life's most meaningful moments often came in the simplest of ways. Fixing what was broken, showing up when it mattered most, and sharing whatever warmth you could offer. Those were the things that truly mattered. The woman he had helped unknowingly gave him a gift that night. a reminder that kindness, even in the most unexpected places, was a light that could break through the darkest storms. And for Robert, that light was more than enough.